As I'm sure many of you are aware, after much rumor and speculation, the Spyro Reignited Trilogy has finally been confirmed, and oh boy am I excited! I've never been the biggest Crash Bandicoot fan, so after the release of the Crash N. Sane Trilogy last year, I wanted Spyro to get the same treatment. And good things come to those who wait. As I mentioned, the Crash Trilogy remake really left no impact on my nostalgia bone. Nostalgia bone? Is that a thing? Ironically, I really never owned any of the Spyro games as a kid, but I did own the Crash Trilogy. I just never really loved them. I ended up playing Spyro games at friends' houses and would play literally for hours. The big open levels, the gliding, it was all a lot of fun, and frankly the brutal difficulty of Crash was a big turnoff for my younger self, who is even worse at video games than I am now. The announcement of the Spyro remake, along with the recent success of some amazing platformers in the past couple of years, really made me realize one thing. Platformers are back, baby! Of course, that isn't to say platformers ever really went anywhere, but it's very clear to see that they haven't really had a big impact or a lot of popularity in recent years. Back in the days of the NES, SNES, and their Sega counterparts, pretty much everything was a platformer. Okay, obviously things like sports games, RPGs, shoot-em-ups, fighting games, and so forth were not platformers, but there were a lot of platformers, probably due to the technical limitations of the time. I mean, you really could only do 2D back then, so what's a good way to do 2D? Well, Mario and Sonic are popular, let's do that! Even licensed games back then were platformers like Home Improvement and Lethal Weapon, which I've talked about before. Then, 3D graphics became commonplace, and while Crash and Spyro had their own unique approaches to platforming, games like Super Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie were able to turn 3D platforming on its head. This was a wild ride that would carry on into the next generation, with games like Jak and Daxter, Ratchet & Clank, and Sly Cooper just to name a few. But after that, things sorta just fizzled out. Why was this? You could argue it's because in the last generation, Microsoft took the lead with the Xbox 360, and honestly, platformers were never really their thing. I mean, they tried on the original Xbox with Blinx the Time Sweeper, remember him? No? Okay. Other than that, really, Xbox is mostly focused on games with guns, explosions. Michael Bay would be proud.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay.
I mean, their biggest games were always games like Halo, Gears of War, what else do they have? Sunset Overdrive? So for a system like the Xbox 360 to take the lead, it gave games like Call of Duty and the plethora of shooters that followed suit the opportunity to take the gaming world and the sales charts by storm. Platformers were just kinda forgotten by most of the mainstream. You could even argue that this is also the case for why JRPGs are a much more niche genre these days compared to the Super Nintendo and PS1 era, but that's a discussion for another video. So why now? Why is there suddenly this increase in popularity for platform games?
Actually, I have an idea.
Who said that?
It's me, your best friend, Bluecoolman.
Friend is a relative term, but go on.
Well, if you ask me, I'd say indie games have a huge role to play in today's platformer scene. With the rise of indie games over the past few years, smaller teams of passionate game developers have been able to make great games and sell them for much cheaper. We no longer live in a market where every game launches at $60, and I for one am all for it. The modern independent game market as we've come to know it has been hugely successful because of platforms like Steam, and credit where credit is due, Xbox Live Arcade on the Xbox 360. Indie games have gotten so popular that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo now commonly showcase what indie games are coming to their platform, so it's no wonder that they have a big part to play in all of this.
And with crowdfunding platforms like Kickstarter spreading opportunity and hope into the hands of developers and gamers alike, we've seen a spike in popularity and interest in the dusty old platformer genre. While some Kickstarter games like Yooka-laylee and, to a greater extent, Mighty No. 9 have ended up falling a bit flat, games like Shovel Knight and A Hat in Time have been a huge triumph for modern retro-inspired platformers and the concept of crowdfunded games in general. These games all have major direct influences from our childhood, and it's because of this direct feed of nostalgia that these games have become so popular. You got Yooka-laylee being directly inspired and developed by the folks who made Banjo-Kazooie. You got A Hat in Time, which is inspired by 3D collectathon platformers altogether. But the question is, why exactly does this generation suddenly care about bringing these old concepts into the modern age of gaming?
Maybe it's because Microsoft did this to Banjo-Kazooie and this to Conquer. And maybe it's because last gen was so saturated with gray and brown shooters starting Duty McShooty, and we're all just dying for some cartoony graphics and some bright colors to prevent us from dying inside.
Maybe it's because we millennials are entering our 30s and we're doing everything we can to escape the cold, clammy hands of death. I mean, Pokemon and Power Rangers are popular again, and we're not having kids because we don't want to share our toys. I know I don't. Or maybe it's because up until recently, Capcom kinda just sorta pretended Mega Man doesn't exist. Look what you made Keiji Inafune do, Capcom! Look what you made him do!
Make the bad guys cry like an anime fan on prom night. Anime fan on prom night. Anime fan on prom night. Prom night. Prom night.
Thankfully, they're back to save the day with an honest-to-goodness Mega Man sequel, Mega Man 11. So, guys, maybe just give us Mega Man Legends 3 so I can finally stop crying myself to sleep at night every night since you've cancelled it. This brings me to my next point. Obviously, indie games aren't the only factor at play here when it comes to the platforming revival. Let's talk about the big boys. No, I'm not talking about myself. Why would you even think that? It's mean. Crash and Spyro aren't the only classic games to get beautiful facelifts. Insomniac Games, who developed the original Spyro Trilogy, later went on to make Ratchet & Clank for the PS2. There have been a few games in that series since then, of which I've played none, until 2016's Ratchet & Clank remake. It was a full-on, from-the-ground-up, modern-generation remake of the original Ratchet & Clank, with some changes here and there, I guess, all in anticipation for the Ratchet & Clank movie. Anyone else already forget that was a thing? But movie or no, this game is freaking solid. In my opinion, one of the best games of 2016. Of course, while Shovel Knight and Ratchet & Clank were merely bubbles in the platforming pot, 2017 really got things boiling. Crash Insane Trilogy, Sonic Mania, Super Mario Odyssey, holy smokes, the big boys are back! Sonic Mania was basically a Sonic fan game officially licensed by Sega, and it ended up being the best Sonic game in years. Oh, and Sonic Forces came out too. Didn't really play it though, but Sonic Mania! And then there was of course Super Mario Odyssey, not only one of my favorite Switch games, but probably one of my favorite games ever. I mean, really think about the big names of platformers and what has happened to them over the past couple of generations. You had Crash and Spyro both passed on from Sony over to Universal and eventually Activision. Crash got tattoos and Spyro got Elijah Wood.
I have to stop him.
Then of course you had Skylanders, which started as a Spyro thing until Activision was like, what the heck is a Spyro? Then you have Mario and Sonic, both of whom stayed at home with their respective publishers. Mario games have been solid as always, but with the Wii not really appealing to mainstream gamers, and the Wii U not really appealing to anyone, it's easy to see how some people may have missed some solid games like Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2. And while I personally love the Wii U, Mario 3D World just isn't a true 3D Mario game in my opinion, and was just kind of eh. As for New Super Mario Bros. U, well, new really isn't new after 3 previous entries. And Sonic... don't even get me started on Sonic. Whatever truly is the cause of this resurgence of platformers, I am all for it, and I cannot wait to play Spyro in September. They just better release it on the freaking Switch.
Oh, now don't you start that.
Oh, I forgot you were here. You have anything else you wanted to add?
Please come to my channel and watch my videos. I'll pay you, I promise.
Fantastic. Bye, everyone. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you're new to the channel and you liked it, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. Also, if you liked the smooth, creamy, sensual voice of my friend the Bluecoolman, feel free to check out his video that I'll link here, as well as the rest of his channel. He truly deserves a lot more views. Every time I say bye, I go into this rambling thing. Anyway. Like, comment, and subscribe.